Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm doing a YouTube video on how to use the Federal Ballpark Estimate calculator. Anybody can use this calculator. You don't have to be a federal government employee. You could work with a private entity. Um, you can work for yourself. It's really just a calculator that will show you how much you will have in retirement if you put aside a certain percentage of your income every year. So I'm going to go over that on how to use it and how to interpret the output results. Before I do that, give you guys a brief summary on what I've been doing in my TSP. I'm not always in my TSP, so you guys know more often than not I'm only in here for you guys for my channel. But indeed, I did a transaction. Um, I did a interfund transfer in November of 27. Um, Before the transfer, as you can see here, uh, I was 88% in the AL income fund, which is the most conservative of the AL funds, and 11% in the AL 2065, which is the most liberal or most risky, if you want to put it that way. The transfer I did entailed me going from, instead of 88% in the AL income, I put 45% in the C fund, which is the S&P 500, and I left 44% in the AL income, and then I'm still 11% in the AL 2065. So the reason why I did this is because um, the last 3 years or so, the vast majority of my funds have been safeguarded in the AL fund. Um, I was of the mindset that the stock market was going to crash at some point in time, and so that's why I put majority of my funds in this AL income fund. Now, no one can predict when the stock market's going to crash or when it's going to reach its peak. And if anyone claims that they can, they're full of it. So I got kind of lucky. Granted, it took 3 years to happen. So for 3 years, I had my majority of my funds safeguarded in the AL income. And then I believe March of this year, we had a 20% correction. So at that point in time, um, the money that I had in the AL income fund was spared losing 20% of what it had. So once again, I couldn't predict when it would happen. And for basically the 3 years that I was in the AL income fund, I didn't do as good as I could have if I would have been in the AL 2065. So pros and cons. That's so the reason why I went into the C fund now, when someone could actually argue that the market is at its peak, is because of quantitative easing. So what is quantitative easing? So quantitative easing is a fancy word for printing money. And from 2008, when we had the stock market crash, the housing crash, till today, this chart only goes to 2015. Um, the federal government, namely the Federal Reserve, printed trillions of dollars to keep the market propped. So it could be argued, and it's basically a proven deal, that the amount of money that they've printed since 2008 till today has artificially propped and inflated the stock market. So that is really the sole basis for why I actually moved a big portion of my funds from the safe fund to the C fund. This is not investment advice, this is just what I did. If the government does print more money, as I think they will, they've printed in the last few months 3 trillion, and I'm very positive they're going to print another trillion or so, which will boost the economy. And so I can be basically a beneficiary of them printing money. And that's the only reason why I did what I did. and understand that I didn't put 100% of my funds in the C fund. I basically put about half, so the rest of my funds are actually still safe in the case we do have a huge market correction, which I believe will happen. Uh, in historically, market crashes have happened around every 10 years. So that's an update on my TSP. As of September of this year, I had 142,000, and now I have 150,000. So it went up about 8,000. So now let's go ahead and go into the calculator. So this calculator is pretty cool. You go to tsp.gov. On the bottom right, click calculator. Click go to Federal Ballpark Estimate Calculator. It'll take you here, and we'll just start a new one. So this calculator once again can be used by people that just want to know how much they could have in retirement if they put aside a set amount of money. This calculator is really good because it takes into consideration such things as wage increases, inflation, and I'll show you the rest here pretty soon. So you go ahead and click Start Estimate and go to FERS, Submit Form. For this instance, I'm going to pretend that I'm a new government employee and I was born on the 1st of January of 1995. So that makes me 25 years old. A brand new 25-year-old federal government employee. My start computation date is going to be this year, 2020, January 1st. CSRS, I'm not covered by that. That CSRS is for those employees that are much older. Those employees that are still with the government that are around, that have about 35 years of service, there's very few left, but those people still have the CSRS coverage. A new employee wouldn't have CSR coverage. So once again, I'm gonna go through this as if it was a federal government employee, filling it out, and understand that if you work for yourself or you work for a Walmart or any company, you can still use this calculator. So the current wage that this brand new GS5, I'm going to say he's a GS5, 25-year-old, started with the government. He's going to start off at a salary of $35,136, and I'm giving him locality pay for Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Las Vegas. I'm from New Mexico, so that's why I did this. So we're going to put 35,136. And then we're going to say that his retirement age is going to be 57, because that's the earliest a person can retire. Years in retirement. When you retire at 57, it's your guess as good as mine as how many years you're going to live thereafter. So by default it's 30, so just put 30. So that means that if you retire at 57, that you'll be needing your retirement income for 30 years thereafter, assuming you die at 87. Replacement rate is basically if you make 100,000 when you retire 30 years from now, that's your wage, and you want to replace 70% of your wage, then you put 70%, meaning in retirement you'll make 70,000 a year. By default 70% is in there. So you can also click these links next to all the inputs and it'll give you a little bit more detail on what to do. The next thing is inflation rate. I'm not going to go into that too deep. This is what's put in there by default. I highly recommend that you do learn what inflation is, because 2.5% is not what I believe inflation is. I have on my YouTube channel, if you go onto YouTube and search TSP and me, Watch the video. It's entitled "The Government is Stealing 3% of Your Retirement." This will go over what inflation is, and I highly recommend you learn what inflation is because it's the phantom eroding factor that stealthily steals money out of your pocket. Also on my website, www.tspandme.com, go to blog and search within my blogs for a blog named Inflation and your TSP, and you'll see in great detail an article I wrote about inflation. And but for now, I'm just going to leave 2.5 in here. Also, default is the wage growth assumption of 2.75. So if you think that your wage is going to grow by 2.75 a year, then that's what you would put here. Just go with what's default. Your rate of return, I'm going to put 8%. One thing that's very important to understand is that if you get an 8% rate of return, your real rate is 8 minus 2.5, the inflation. So 5.5 is actual rate of return. That's very important to know because most financial planners, they just tell you, oh, you're going to make 10%, you're going to make 12%. But they never tell you that in all reality, because of inflation, that rate of return is what it is minus inflation. Rate of return after retirement's assumed to be less than 3% or less according to TSP. That's because you'll probably be in a more conservative fund when you retire, thus making a less return on your money. I think the reason why they put 3% is so that you can have a return greater than inflation, because when you're in retirement in a safe fund, as long as that safe fund is making 3% or basically 0.5% more than inflation, you will be beating inflation, so your money in retirement won't run out just because of inflation. And then this is what's put by default for the annuity. When you retire, you can either take your retirement out through an annuity or a lump sum. An annuity won't be taxed as much as a lump sum amount, and you can read more about that here. Go ahead and click submit form, and all that stuff we entered, someone that works for Walmart, themselves, Facebook, they can enter. Those things are the same for them as they would be a government employee. So for this new 25-year-old, he has a balance of 0 in his TSP, and he is going to contribute a minimum of 5%. It behooves every federal government employee to at least put 5% in their TSP because the government matches 5. So if you put 5, they'll put 5, and in all, you'll be contributing 10% of your income. This automatically calculates for you. If you're with a different company, let's say you're with Walmart and they match your 401k with 3%, assuming you put 3%, then you would put, because this calculator takes into account the fact that the TSP will match up to 5%. If your Walmart employer will match you 3%, then you'd probably want to just put 0.25 or something. Or sorry, you probably want to put, let's see. If you put 1 here, just put 3 actually. Just put 3, that'll work. Okay, this 25-year-old doesn't have any savings, So non-TSP savings, you don't have anything, so leave it 0. If you are a government employee that's been with the government for 15 years and you already have like 100,000 plus in your retirement like I do, and I was doing this calculator, I would put what my current balance is here. So that's the only difference between a new employee and someone that's been with the government for several years. So 0 for this example. Your post-retirement income, if you are going to be working after you retire and you know what your income's going to be, that's what you would put here. If you're not going to be working after retirement, then just leave it 0. Social Security, I assume that I'm not going to get nothing, so I just put 1 because the calculator doesn't allow you to put anything. 0 doesn't allow you to leave it blank or put 0. The reason why I don't assume I'm getting Social Security is because right now it's already bankrupt. By the time I retire, I won't be surprised if it's just either pennies that I get or altogether not around. That's a whole different story and a whole different blog I have to write. Go ahead and submit form. Oh, it says wage contribution, so we've got to put 5% here. Submit form. Okay, so here's the results. This 25-year-old that's going to retire at 57, that currently has a wage of $35,136, who wants to replace 70% of his wage in retirement with 30 years of service. It's really 32 because 30 plus 25 is 55. The minimum retirement age is 57. That's why they put 32 here automatically for you. With an inflation rate of 2.5%, a wage growth of 2.75, a rate of return of 8, and a rate of return after retirement of 3, and an annuity interest rate of 2.25. I'm not going to go through this. You can figure all this out by clicking these buttons. You're contributing 5%. You don't have anything in your retirement. The government's giving you 5% for a total all-in contribution rate of 10%. In today's current dollars, 30 years from now, in today's current dollars, over a 30-year span, you will have $282,665 in your TSP. That's today's dollars. 30 years from now, this same amount will actually be $607,732. So that's taking into account a 2.5% inflation rate compounded over 30 years. It's a big difference. That's why inflation is one of the most important things in your retirement calculator calculations. So if you're getting an annuity today, you'd be getting $747 a month. 30 years from now, that same amount would be a check of double, more than double, 1,607. So it tells you on the bottom that based on your input, you will be able to replace 55.7 of your final wages instead of 70%. We wanted to replace 70%, but we didn't meet the goal because we're not saving enough. 5% is not enough. And it says here that percent of wages you need to save is 8%. So let's just go back and plug 8%. And let's go to submit form. And now it says you will be able to replace 62.8, so almost 70%. So you can keep on increasing the the amount you give to the TSP until you reach your goal of 70%. The corresponding amount that you'll have in your TSP if you give 8% instead of 5%, and it's basically 8% plus 5. So that's what it says here, 8 plus 5. So in all, you'll be giving 13%. If you give 13% instead of 10% to your TSP, you'll have 367,000 instead of previously, I think it was 240,000. So it makes a big difference on how much you contribute. The most I was contributing at one point was about 25%, which is a lot. So that's how you use the TSP calculator. If you guys have any questions, feel free to call me and ask me. Just to give you guys an idea of, let's just say for my current scenario, I have about 150,000 in my account, and I'm only giving 5%. Everything else is the same. If I submit the form at that, at that current savings rate, I should have $1 million in my retirement. 30 years from now, that same million will be worth 2.2 million. So if over 30 years I give what I'm currently giving, this is what I'll have. In all reality, I don't have 30 more years. I'm 35, so 57 minus 35. I need 22 more years, so let's actually plug that in. So let's go to 22. And that should all be good. So when I retire, I should have, I don't know if it recalculated, but you guys get the idea. Just keep on playing with the number. I probably have to go back and undo everything and restart the estimate. I hope this video was helpful. It's an excellent way to be able to figure out how much you would have in retirement, whether you're a new employee, an employee with the government for 5 years, 15, especially if you've been with the government for 25 years and you want to see if what you'll have in retirement. It's a very important tool to use so that you can figure out if you can retire 5 years from now, assuming you've already put 25 years. If you guys have any questions on how to use it, please feel free to reach out, and I hope you found it helpful. Thank you very much for your time.